The Acolyte episode 5 has come and gone, and it was a very fun episode, I would say. There's a lot more positive going around, I think, about the Acolyte this week than maybe weeks past. Some of that fair, some of it maybe not. But nonetheless, I think we have a lot of fun stuff to talk about today.
Yeah, I agree, man. It was a real payoff episode. I think we'd all been waiting for some things to come to a head.
Yeah.
And they finally did in pretty dramatic fashion. So it was exciting. I mean, it was another short one, but
it was,
man, it was packed. So
yeah, I agree. And last week I kind of said like the short episodes are working for me because they don't have room to mess around in these.
Yeah.
This one, just selfishly, I could have went for an hour of that. Just like maybe he still takes everybody out, spoiler alert, but he does it methodically over an hour. But again, the same result that I would have wanted. So that was, man, just such a good episode. So we've got a lot to talk about, so we're going to try to be more structured this time, maybe than we sometimes are on this podcast. So what we're going to do today, very laid out order that I'm nearly positive we will stray from. But the plans are, and I've written these down to try to be more efficient. We're going to go through our episode thoughts and our grade on the episode. We're going to talk about the action. It was so good. I think the best action, we'll talk about it more, but the best action Disney has pulled off in Star Wars, lightsaber action. I have to be specific. Best lightsaber action. Rogue One still has some pretty good action in it. The Sith, we got to talk about that. We finally know who it is. And then where do we go from here? So we're going to kind of talk about where our few surviving characters, how we think their story plays out in the last 3 episodes. I think we're kind of in the dark here, which usually happens once we get around episode 5 or 6. So that's not to be too surprising there. But starting off, what are your initial thoughts and then your grade on the episode? Maybe your grade first and then the thoughts.
I think I'd put it at maybe an 8.5. There were a few things that kind of towards the end that we'll talk about that were a little off, that I had questions about. But I mean, the majority of the episode was just really tense, really high intensity. I mean, if you just wanted an episode devoted to action and lightsaber battles, like, you couldn't really ask for a whole lot more in this episode. So I really enjoyed it, man. I was on the edge of my seat. They did a really good job setting a very tense tone with this. Like, I felt like throughout the whole thing, I'm just waiting for somebody to die, something to happen, just kind of on the edge of your seat feeling. So so far, it's you've heard this from most people on the internet, if you're looking around, that it's probably the best episode so far in the season. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's an 8.5 for me. On my reaction last night, I said 8.5. But I mean, as far as how I felt watching it, that was a hard 8.5. Like, it was so fun. The only complaints I have, and we'll kind of get to it, is, and this is not even a real complaint. I just thought the episode was so fast paced and had just an excellent pacing, kind of kept you going. And then they slowed it down a lot at the very end. And so for me, I was like, you're going and then you slam your car at the stop or the red light, right? Like, it turns yellow and you're not expecting it. So that was kind of the only complaint I would have. And still, it served the purpose of the story, which we'll get to.
Yeah. I had some questions about, we'll get to it, some questions about Osha's reactions and kind of how she is at the end. It just seems a little off. That was really the only complaint I had. So
I think her and Soul both seem a little off at the end, which, again, we'll talk about it. But just the episode was easily the best of this series. I mean, episode 1 and 2 were good Star Wars, right? It felt good. Episode 3, again, I don't care for it, but maybe we learn more. Episode 4, I previously thought was the best episode, but then episode 5 happens. So that's what you want to happen. The episode next kind of improves the reviewing experience. I like how this episode it's not a different episode than 4. I read something that the director or producer or whatever said. it was intended to be one long episode or something along those lines, but they kind of had to break it up. So I view this as part A, part B, maybe the same episode. Like you kind of like, if you're into theological talk, you should read Luke and then Acts, right? Because it's the same book in the Bible. Well, this episode 4 and 5 are the same thing. It's just for money, whatever purposes, they had to split it down the middle.
Well, I mean, even by title, right? It's day and then night. Those are your episode titles. So this is the course of a day. So
I don't think when I rewatch this episode, unless I'm just crammed for time, and I'm talking about from here on out, I don't think I will ever watch it standalone. I'll probably watch 4 and 5 back to back, just because
that makes sense.
I think it's probably a better viewing experience, and like total time, it's probably like 50 minutes if you don't, have the credits. So very good episode, 8.5 for me, easy. Best lightsaber combat. We'll go ahead and move into the action, but it's the best lightsaber combat that we've seen with Disney Star Wars. People have a lot of complaints about Disney Star Wars. I personally am fine with it. They've not done everything perfectly by a long shot, but we get a lot of Star Wars content, and a lot of the complaints has been, the sequel trilogy, watching those lightsaber duels. It's like they're swinging baseball bats, or they're swinging like 100-pound stick, that it's just slow and heavy, and the choreography is not excellent. You watch Ahsoka, and it's just kind of, outside of Anakin being there, everything is just, it's not quite what you would expect out of what we've seen from Ahsoka in animation, what we've seen from Ezra in animation. It's just a little different. And I think everyone watching kind of knows what we're talking about when we say that.
Yeah,
it's just not the same.
I've heard people kind of allude to it being like a dance, right? It feels like it's a very methodical step here, swing here,
forced.
Step here, swing here.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel as much like two people in combat. Which that's really kind of one of the best things about those prequel movies, is watching those, is you feel like these people that are wielding these lightsabers are really locked in a duel with each other.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sell that way with some of the stuff we've had previously, but this I felt like was, as close as we've been to that since the prequels. It was really intense, really high pace. These guys were not just touching batons together, right? They were swinging at each other. So it was fun to watch. I think it answered a lot of complaints that people have had in a pretty resounding way, I thought. So
I would say so. And you sent me an article a few weeks ago. You touched on it a little bit last week, but whoever, I don't know if it was Leslie Headland or who, but someone talked about the fact that they were like, hey, we want to change how we're doing these lightsabers. And someone at Disney said, no, right? Like we've got whatever. And she said, no, I really think we should change it. And so they gave her a chance on changing it. So something is different with the props. And I think that's a big thing, first of all. Like if your props don't allow for good combat, then there's nothing you can do with choreography. If your props is essentially like one of the toys I have up here on my wall, right? There's only so much you can do. But if you change the prop and then you add in some prequel choreography with it, well, it's a no-brainer. You're going to get closer to the prequels. Yeah. And that's what we saw. Now, it's not Duel of the Fates. It's not Battle of the Heroes. It's not Anakin versus Dooku in episode 3. It's none of that, but it's closer. And I think that's something that we can all really appreciate. And it just seemed more realistic outside of the Sith guy taking out like 7 Jedi at once or something like that. Yeah. You would think one of them could probably get an attack on him when his back is turned. But again, it's fiction, right? Like you expect stuff like that. But once you got to one-on-one, one-on-two combat, I thought it seemed much more realistic than anything we've seen the last decade in Star Wars lightsaber duels.
And it was a lot of choreography for a lot of different characters. Which was because they all fought pretty differently, right? Mm-hmm. Jackie's fighting style was different from Soul's fighting style. So it was, it's not, having different choreography for all of them was, that's a lot of work. Yep. And so they clearly put a lot of time into that.
Well, even like the characters, the no-name characters at the beginning, they didn't last very long, but their stuff looked cool too. Like they were doing cool stuff. How about, him stabbing that one Jedi and pulling the other two? Yeah. How awesome was that? Like,
I think
move.
A lot of one of the really cool things about watching him fight these Jedi is how off balance they are throughout all of it, because he's so out of line with what they expect in combat. And so, I mean, he just has all of them. They're just on their toes the whole time because he's doing things in a way that they would never do them. And they can't comprehend that. And so I feel like all of the combat kind of plays into that idea that he's doing things that are either deceptive or unfamiliar or, So I thought all of it played into that kind of, that idea that the Jedi, they're really off balance with this guy.
Yep. Well, I mean, you played sports, and I played sports. I won't pretend to be good at sports or anything, but played. And so, like, practice is one thing, but the game is another story. So I just feel like these Jedi forever have just practiced. You know, they've done their stuff at the temple, but then, oh man, we're in the game now, and there's an actual guy trying to hurt us. Well, that's different. And so you see that on full display. I thought it was good to see. And I mean, he just makes such quick work of essentially everyone until he starts getting to the real characters. Then, you see a little bit of a fight going, and he was probably pretty tired at that point as well. I mean, he had just fought a whole bunch of people up to that point, but the Jackie fight, I mean, he fought Soul here and there, and it was good, but I really enjoyed probably the Jackie fights more than any of the rest of it. She was good. Daphne Keane, the actress, she did good.
She was. Her style was really quick, really fast paced. A lot of like a flurry of strikes. So that was, it was fun to watch. And it's interesting because he's really just interested in getting to May, right? He's not really. At some points, it felt like he was kind of toying with him, just like, all right, peace out, I'm gone.
Yeah, he would throw his cloak, vanish. Right? And
and then he'd be gone.
They hadn't
right?
seen his face yet, so he was cool. Doing whatever.
Yeah. So which is interesting that he's not necessarily there to kill them at this point. He's after May, and he's fine with leaving them to go get her. But obviously that shifts a little later. So.
Does shift. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. It's part of the action. So the big news, and if by some chance you haven't seen it and you're still listening at the 12-minute mark, I mean, we're super spoiling it. But so first he kills Jackie first, right? And then Yord.
Yeah. Of our main characters. Yeah.
Yeah, of the main characters, right? So he gets Jackie. Jackie puts up a good fight. She fights him technically two separate scenes. So she fights him once outside of Kilnaka's hut. Just right there. She has two blades. I love how they kept having, and is it from the cortosis where the sabers will like turn off and then turn back on? Yeah. I didn't know what that word was till yesterday. So like, I'm not sharp. I had to look it up. But so throughout the episode, it's just a really cool thing. Like, oh no, is it going to turn back on? And then it finally does. But she has Kilnaka's saber. So it's like a dual wielding at the time. Then Soul shows up, and so they're both fighting him. And I thought it was really cool to see Master and Apprentice fighting the Sith. But ultimately, she jumps at him, and he has the Cal Kestis, on his saber. So he takes
it
off.
Little mini blade.
And he's got two sabers, just like on Fallen Order and Survivor, which that's cool to kind of see that making its way on screen. And he puts the 3-hole punch on her, and
3-hole punch.
That was it. I saw a meme on that. That's not original, but he gets her. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, no, it is, because she really, in her Jedi training, like kind of fights him to a standstill. Like she knocks his mask off and gets a good hit on him, but ultimately, being deceptive in nature, he's got that little, it's like a little short it's almost like a lightsaber dagger that he pulls out of the hill.
It is just like what you can do in Fallen Order, how you've got the shorter end on the bottom.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that was just one of those things where, again, they're expecting a fight that's straight up, that's fair, that's one-on-one, we're going to fight with our sabers, not I'm going to pull out a hidden weapon and stab you while you're off guard. So
it's that hubris.
It is, yeah. And so you see that and you touched on the cortosis thing, like that was really cool.
Yeah, you talk about that because I'm clueless.
Well, this is one of those things where, like, as crazy people got about the Kiadi Mundi age thing, like,
were people upset about that?
Being I feel like I heard something. Like, you know, what, like the Cortosis thing, like that's the kind of thing like from Legends and the EU that you pull in and it's just super cool. Like, so me, like I was so excited as soon as I saw him like block and then headbutt that other guy's lightsaber at the beginning, and they shorted out. I was like, oh, that's Cortosis, right? Yeah. So it's really cool to see these things brought in that are just kind of scattered throughout. You know, we've talked about it before. There's a ton of stuff that's been snuck in and pulled in from all avenues of Star Wars. And this is just another one of those things. And these are the types of things that I feel like for people who have been really invested in that kind of thing, like it's really cool to see that stuff brought in
into canon now,
into live action. And so, Cortosis, it's really cool because it fits in with his character too, because it's a very, very rare metal, right? Like
and he's the potions master.
Yeah, and like he's a procurer of things, right? Like he knows how to get his hands on things, and so he would be a guy who might be able to find some of this stuff in the galaxy. Because it's like
he's Khmer, by the way. Have we said it? He's Khmer. Yeah, I don't know that we've officially said it on our podcast, but he is Khmer. Yeah, which we thought, but we'll talk about him more in a minute. But
that's super cool. I feel like it fits in with his character of like this procurer of things, that he's able to get his hands on this super rare metal. That, I mean, one of its trademarks is it absorbs energy, and so within the EU and Legend stuff, it would short out a lightsaber. So that's another thing that I feel like,
just in case,
as a Jedi fighting him, like your lightsaber's coming down on this dude's helmet, you're like, I won, like this is it, and then your lightsaber goes out. So again, it's just everything he does keeps these guys off guard, like they don't know what's going on or why it's happening, and so it's that was a really cool addition to this, is to bring in the Cortosis stuff. I thought it was really well used.
It just enhances the action, because again, it's not just the lightsabers, but at the same time, so let's talk on Yord. So Yord's style was a little stiff, I thought, like just the way he fought. Not that it was bad, but I just think that's kind of his style. And I thought it was cool, like seeing a yellow blade. That was the imagery of all of it was good, just because it was dark and it looked really good on screen. That 4K TV that you talked me into buying last year really paying off now. It was cool to see him fight. But man, he takes out Yord without a saber. Were you expecting to see that on screen?
You were upset when your favorite character died. I know that really probably bothered
you. He got his, didn't he? I was so happy. Not that I was so happy, but like, Yord on screen is cool with me.
I did expect him to put up a little bit more of a fight.
Well, he was hurt. They hit his leg earlier. Yeah.
But and this is one of the things I thought about, to his credit, is he puts aside like, well, this is what I've been ordered to do, versus, well, maybe this is the right thing to do. Maybe I don't follow orders here, and now it gets him killed.
He probably should have followed orders.
You could argue there at the end, though, he better embodies a Jedi, right? The idea of I'm going to go back and help protect.
As helpless as he turned out to be, but
hopefully Osha feels pretty bad about that, because that's pretty much her fault. But
she's the worst.
She's like, let's go back. We're going to make a huge difference in this fight.
Made a difference, all right. Yeah. So we have him, but also one little thing that I think we are likely to miss in all of this is Soul is throwing punches as well. So when we're in between, they didn't completely leave the martial arts. So you still have the awesome saber stuff, but when there's not, like I think Soul throws a forearm like to the side of the face of Khmer as well. And I thought that was cool too.
For a short portion, they're both unarmed, and they're both kind of going hand to hand for a little bit, which is actually when Soul gets the upper hand on him. Yeah. And kind of knocks him down, and then pulls out his own saber, or recovers his saber.
Something like that. That was cool that they kind of incorporated what we've liked from earlier. May is still throwing the daggers at one point. I mean, this was all of the Star Wars combat that we have seen in the Acolyte in one episode. So that was pretty cool.
True.
I like that a lot.
That is true.
So I think we're probably good on the action at this point. I mean, top notch, very much so enjoyed it. Hopefully we get to see a little more of it before the season's over. But let's go ahead and talk about Khmer being the Sith. So we've kind of been
big shocker.
We've kind of been talking that up for a few weeks now. Just because I think intentionally were throwing stuff out here and there. Obviously, they wouldn't have written in like the pieces of lie scene, and then that last episode, he was just mailing it in that he was the Sith. I mean, he's packing his bag really quick. He
even has that line to make. He's like, "You really didn't know it was me."
Yeah. So for all the people out there who were flipping out that it was going to be one of the witches, I hope you can sleep at night now. Like you were really freaking out. I hope you're okay after that. I hope you get past the Ki-Adi-Mundi thing, and I hope that you recover fully from this. But it wasn't a witch; it was Chimere. I think very appropriate. And I mean, just the deception which you expect out of a Sith. Yeah. He has it all right. He kind of changes his voice even when May's there, and he goes, "Oh hey," or something like that. Like he goes back to like
his goofball voice.
Yeah,
it's like,
I mean, how that's kind of goofy, but like deceptive, which is how a Sith would stay in hiding.
And it makes him feel a little unhinged, right? Like they're like just
a
little messed up the way he did that. I mean, obviously he is, but
well, he's a Sith, so you got a little bit of messed up going on there. But by nature. But I thought it was cool too, and you touched on it a little bit. He didn't really care about getting rid of all these Jedi. He's more interested. He tells Soul, "I want an acolyte. I want to be able to do the Force the way I see fit," which obviously isn't good. But at the same time, the Jedi are kind of hypocrites as well. So you got that dynamic going, and he even tells Soul, like when he says that Jackie was just a child, and he's like, "You brought her here."
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he's the bad guy. Yeah. Don't hear us wrong. He's the bad guy, but he points out a lot of issues in the Jedi. Like, hey, you brought a kid to this fight. You're not exactly as polished as you feel like you are. There's some issues going on here, and so I like that he brings that to the forefront, because in the prequel trilogy, what are we going to see Anakin doing when he's having that scene with Obi-Wan where he says, "From my point of view, the Jedi are evil"? Well, he's not right, but he's not wrong. The Jedi had some issues, but there's a little bit of truth in every bit of that, even if it's not like, hey, he's the good guy. What he says isn't completely wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, and there were two things that stood out to me with him. One is he seems like he has some background with the Jedi, because he's talking about how they just won't let him do his thing, like he just wants to be left alone. Mm-hmm. I hope they don't leave that open like that, because it really points to why does he feel that way? Why does he feel like the Jedi have not let him do what he wants to do? Because as far as we know, up until this point, he hasn't had any interaction with them, unless he has, right? Unless, I don't know if something happened with him as a kid, right? Like, and then he also makes that comment of, he says, "Well, as a Jedi, you might, or someone like a Jedi might call me a Sith." Yeah, which is an odd thing to say, right? Because the Jedi didn't give them the title Sith, right? Like that's
their thing.
They practice. They're Sith, unless he's not really a Sith.
Well, and have you seen the article with the actor?
No.
So a few people posted it. So we're filming on Wednesday afternoon. If you're not behind the scenes here. So this afternoon, I saw a few accounts put up his interview that just came out today as well, where he's talking about it and specifically refers to the character as a Sith Lord. Now, at the same time, the Yord character said Anakin blew up the Death Star. So maybe, Freudian slip. He don't, maybe he don't know what he's talking about. But you would think, having filmed this, he would know whether his character is a Sith Lord or not. So maybe he's with it.
So if that's the case, then that's a little bit of a weird line. If he is a Sith,
I think he's just playing,
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe fighting against the negative connotation of it.
But it also, he says, "I don't have a name. I don't know if he doesn't have a master." Like, I wonder if this is some guy who came across like a Sith holocron, right? And has just been kind of learning things from something like that, kind of on his own. And I kind of I think it would be really cool. I think we touched back on this initially, but like if he's not really affiliated with a master and is just doing his own thing, if we do have a Sith master show up at the end and be like, no, we're not playing Sith, right? And
take care of this. Yeah.
If that's how he meets his end, is like the real Sith Lord
cool.
comes in, is like, you're risking our discovery here.
Yep.
That'd be a cool way to bring that in. But yeah, I don't know. He said some things that just kind of make me question whether it's that straightforward. I don't know. I'm assuming we'll get some more information on hopefully his backstory, but
yeah, I think we will. I mean, he's got some. So my thoughts on him, his history with the Jedi. This is just haven't had too long to think about this, but assuming he does have a master, which I think he does, I think he's just been kind of fed the whole peace is a lie and the Jedi are the corrupt ones, and like we could be out ruling the galaxy if it wasn't for this huge order, because they're very outmanned. The whole strategy from, if you read the Plagueis novel, the strategy was a political upheaval because it was the only way they could do it. So I think it's going to line up with that. So, hey, the two of us can't go, man down the whole temple. So I'm assuming he kind of is like under that oppressive thought of, okay, they're not going to let us do what we want to do. Like we could be out influencing whatever openly. We could be taking out people that don't agree with us. We could do all this. But the minute we start using the Force and the minute we, taking our sabers out in public, doing whatever, it's over, right? They're going to send the whole army and we're done. So that was kind of my thought on that. I think that would make the most sense.
I could see that. That would make sense as more of a general statement about the Sith and not necessarily his experience specifically.
As far as him saying like, y'all might call me a Sith, I think that was just kind of, I don't want to say it was poor writing, but I think it was just kind of like crafty writing. So they were just kind of putting a line in there to maybe throw one back on the Jedi. Maybe he's playing mind tricks with May and Osha or something like that. I didn't look too much into that because I think obviously it's a Sith show. They've said it over and over and over again in the build up. So he's a Sith, unless like what you said, he's playing Sith and the real Sith show up at the end. I can see that as well.
Yeah, and I could see trying to write a line where he's like trying to mess with the Jedi or something, but I don't know. Something about that line, if he is a Sith, just sits weird with me because it's almost like he's saying, well, that's just what you call me, right?
I'm whatever you say I am,
Yeah, which is really not what the Sith are, right? The Sith are very, like, they are who they are, and they know who they are, and they're proud of who they are. So it's just a little weird to me that he'd be like, well, that's your name for me. And unless there's another meaning there, maybe we'll get something else on that, but I don't know. It was an odd line, so I'll reserve judgment to see where things go with that line.
If they even pick back up on it.
Yeah, but to me, it could be a potentially big line, or it could be a line that ultimately meant nothing that was just kind of weird.
Yeah.
So
I think one of us needs to remember that if it doesn't come back up when we do our, postmortem on this show in a few weeks. But another thing on him, when he's talking about he wore a mask to stay secretive. And he's kind of like being sarcastic. We're like, well, why would you show yourself? And he's like, well, I was wearing a mask, kind of like making reference to that. I just thought that was funny. But at the same time, the mask doesn't matter whether you're wearing, like, you're not in hiding in a mask out doing things like that. So I think that was just a joke line, kind of a throwaway. But it was kind of like, does that mask really change things? Because they were pretty upset with you with the mask on. So the mask being off, I don't think changes things.
And that's another thing where I'm going to have to wait and see where things go, because either he doesn't, because it seems like he doesn't care about them knowing that he exists in general, just specifically
who he is,
his identity. Which that's also doesn't seem very Sith-like. Like, I'm fine with knowing them I exist. I just don't want to know who I am. Like, that would still throw up some red flags. I feel like if you're a Sith and they just know that you're back and you exist, that would be a problem. So that was another thing that just kind of, I'm like, well,
off a little.
Does this guy actually care about the Sith? Does he actually care about the Sith being discovered, or does he really just kind of have his own thing and his own agenda right now?
Well, and it could be both. He for sure has his own agenda. So he wants an acolyte And I still believe it's to take over the master spot, because that's the Sith thing to do. In all of Star Wars, that's what they always do. Someone trying to overthrow a master. So that's just kind of their thing. So that doesn't bug me as much, but I do hope we get some concrete explanations on that. I think it would be strange if we didn't. Now, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, and we're pretty sure he's not the master, right? And so,
they've said he's not in an interview.
And so it could just be him making a really dumb mistake, right?
Correct.
And not necessarily understanding the severity of revealing himself, maybe.
Yeah.
Again, that's one of those things where we'll have to reserve judgment until we see.
We got a few weeks. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's essentially it for him as the Sith. Oh, one last thing on that. Sorry. Yeah. The like his identity, why it would be such a big deal versus mask versus not. Mm-hmm. My thought there was just because you got to remember it's the High Republic still. They kind of got a whole grasp on everything. I picture it kind of like the Empire had a grasp on everything at that point. So if you got the guy's face, I feel like eventually you could find him. And so if he's just wearing the mask, he could just disappear and go be Chimere like he was doing. So that's kind of the only thing which supposedly the Jedi could sense it, but they couldn't sense Palpatine under their nose. So I think we can write that. So
that's good at hiding.
Yeah, they got to be. So all of that said, where do we go from here? So when we end the episode, we've got the switcheroo. We've got May has cut her hair. She's took Osha's clothes, which is also a very Star Wars thing. Stealing someone's outfit and going and doing something, a reconnaissance type thing that happens a lot. So she does that. Osha is with Chimere. And one complaint I've seen, now that one part, that was my only complaint from the show, is that it slowed down a lot, like a screeching halt. But again, if the purpose was to get them split with the opposite masters, it did the point. So whatever, that's fine. Yeah. The one complaint I've seen on stuff I've posted so far, though, is Osha has a tattoo on her arm. So like, obviously you would think the Sith knows who she is, and May has like the witch tattoo on her
face.
So you would think Soul would know it's her, because I mean it's not that covered, you can see it. So but maybe he's still disoriented, because on the screen I kind of had to like rub my eyes a couple times to make sure I wasn't seeing things wrong, but the screen kind of started shaking and stuff. So it makes me think maybe he's a little disoriented, or he knows, and he's like, okay, now I've got Osha alone. So she thinks maybe she's got Soul alone. Well, maybe he's playing her, and he knows it's May instead of Osha.
I don't see him leaving Osha behind, though. Like,
that's a good point.
I don't know that he would do that. I think it's probably what you're saying. I think he's just disoriented, right? When you get knocked out, he's probably not inspecting her forehead, right? Like, he hears her voice, they get up, they start leaving. She's walking behind him. Now, if at some point he stops, he should be able to tell the difference, right? I mean, even if
he hasn't stopped yet,
whether he sees her or even if he just reaches out in the Force, he should be able to tell there's a difference.
Basil knows.
Basil knows something is up. I think it's funny.
Is he?
I think it's hilarious that like we've had all this fighting, and then all of a sudden there's Basil. He just pops up.
You see him a few times
running around in the background, following people.
No one cares about him, by the way.
Correct.
Total non-threat.
Nobody asked where Basil was at any point, right?
The Moths don't care. The Sith don't care. The Jedi don't care.
How many Basil characters have just been left behind on missions because they just forget about them?
Still sniffing around for the Wookiee. Never found him.
Never found him.
But I do think so. He's sniffing for the Wookiee. Does she smell like him because she was in his house? So is that why he's like
Pip though, and was sniffing?
Yeah,
Pip.
He's got Pip too. That's right. Yeah.
So I don't know what but that wouldn't. Well, no, because May does have Osha's clothes, so I imagine that's what he's smelling on Pip.
Interesting.
I think he's tracking his way back to them. Well, obviously because he came on the ship.
It's a gem of a storyline.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that's going with him. Maybe he's going to be the one who's like, "Hey, this ain't her." Like
they're selling toys.
Her clothes, she and her clothes don't smell the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Genius.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this plays out, because I don't know if Soul's going to start going into this whole revealing truth before he realizes it's May. And maybe May gets a different perspective of this story that shifts her perspective of what happened.
Yeah.
Because that's one of Soul's big things, is he wanted Osha to know the truth. And so, especially now, it's probably weighing pretty heavily on him. So I wonder if he goes into all that with her. I don't know. And I'm not sure what May's plan is right now, because she had kind of given up on killing him. She could have killed Soul when he was unconscious, right? Yeah. So I don't know if this is her way off planet. She needed to find a ship. Maybe she's about to try to take over the ship. I don't know.
Just get gone. Yeah, could be.
Definitely don't know what Kymir's plan is.
That is correct. Yeah.
He's a real wild card.
I think he has upgraded. So here's my thoughts on this. I wouldn't be surprised to see May hearing whatever the truth ends up being at this point. Yeah. I mean, they've got to figure out what the truth is going to be. We don't know yet. So I'm assuming he's going to get to tell the closest thing to the truth to May. Maybe she does have a shift. Maybe she tries to kill him. Who knows? But on the flip side of that, I think Kymir is going to tell not the truth to Osha, or a twisted version of it.
Partial truth, yeah.
Yeah, with some lies mixed in there. And what if that shifts her towards him, and he's just upgraded his acolyte who trained with the Jedi for years. So now he's got potentially a more adept Force user that's got some rage fuel going on. Yeah. Nothing really to turn back to. Interesting concept there.
Because that would be one of the things that I thought was weird about Osha, but that would make for a really big betrayal, is she is staunchly defensive of the Jedi, right? Like, even when May's like, hey, we're back together, let's get out of here, she's like, no, I'm arresting you, right? Like, you've committed crimes, I'm loyal to the Jedi.
Citizen's arrest.
I thought that was a little weird. But if she is that committed to what the Jedi think and what the Jedi think is right, like, then that learning the truth that they were involved in some of this stuff could be a huge turning point for her. I was watching the guys on Beyond the Dune Sea talk last week about it and talking about stuff, and one of the things that I had commented in there was just like, what if we see Osha kill Soul? Like, how sad would that be? Like, that would be
that would honestly
be incredibly sad.
Yeah, and that would be like an ending where they didn't just play it safe too.
Yeah, that would, like, that's the final test for her to become the Acolyte, is she ends up killing Soul. I don't know that it'll go that way. In a lot of the interviews previously, Headland had talked about really this being a show about the sisters and kind of about their dynamic and their love for each other. So I also kind of wonder if it is going to go a pathway towards reconciliation for them, which that wouldn't allow for that if she kills Soul, probably. So I don't know.
See how it ends happy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Soul's going to die one way or another, right?
I feel like
everybody else is dead. It's just a matter of who's going to do it. It's kind of the big question.
Yeah,
and who's going to kill Kymir? Because I think he's probably going to die.
Someone's got to. Yeah. So, hey, I don't think anybody on, not Brendok, Kofar. I don't think anyone on Kofar that was in that episode by the end of this makes it. I'm not even sure that the twins make it. I think it would just be weird for anyone to know. So you almost think they have to go. I think it's probably the Sith Master that shows up and does all this. Maybe, there's some damage done before he shows up, but I think Vernestra, right? The rope whip girl or the light whip. I think, because that's the only thing we haven't seen left as far as the trailers go. True. She's got to show up on Kofar, I'm assuming, or some planet. Yeah. And she's using her whip as well. So I almost think, because she's in on the cover up, I almost wonder if, like, the ending of this show is going to be the Master taking her out as well. We figure out who he is and just kind of ends from there, to where it could have a season 2, or it's just kind of, a nice, neat little ribbon tied on top of this series.
Yeah, because she's a character who to my understanding, doesn't have an end yet. So
Yeah.
But we know she doesn't appear to be around when and I mean, she's pretty old already, but her species lives a while, I think.
Yeah. Well, and we also know that that's all kind of subjective at this point too. How I mean, that's a touchy
the Light
topic.
of the Jedi novel is like she pops
that's
up
canon.
in those novels, and it's canon.
Yeah.
And it's
She's
like 100
young
years. Isn't it like 100 years before this?
At least
it's a pretty long time before these events. So she's been around a while.
Yeah, that's true, because she was a teenager. She was like the youngest Jedi Knight, right, or something like that. That's like kind of her deal.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to see. The only way I can see both of them surviving is if they both kind of decide that they're done with the Force, right? That they're just gonna move on and leave all of this behind and kind of go do something separate in the galaxy and just try to almost pretend that none of this ever happened, you know?
They could break out the Bugali.
But
from
neither
Rogue One.
one's going to be able to escape. And the what?
The Bugali from Rogue One. The Mind Eater.
Yeah. Oh, that thing's terrifying.
Saw Gerrera shows up and takes care of everybody.
That's what. Yeah. There you go. Oh man.
Fixed. It's like Men in Black with the. They do the little. Yeah.
Yep. Strips your memory. Yeah, I forgot about that thing.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Bring it back.
Yeah,
baby.
I don't know. There's and that's kind of the thing is a lot really came to a head in this episode. With 3 episodes left, there's a lot still that they can do, because I feel like it's at a point now where I don't know what happens next, but they still have 3 episodes to do it all. So I feel like they're in a good place time-wise to answer some of these questions, but man, all the stuff we were waiting for, a lot of it kind of just happened. Yep. With the exception
we just need the
we
master.
Still haven't seen Soul's point of view from that thing. So
do you think you kind of get the Ahsoka feels on this? Like once we got past episode, was it 5 in Ahsoka or 6? Once they got to where they were going to that other galaxy, and you're kind of like, okay, we got a few episodes left. There's not a lot to do. How are they going to do this? And I know you are not overly fond of how they wrapped up Ahsoka, as far as like the 6 and 7 maybe. So
yes, I love the finale. I just thought they hit a little bit of a pacing problem once they got to Peridia, and I felt like they weren't sure what to do with the time they had. And it was fine. It was still enjoyable, but it just seemed a little off to me. And again, I love the ending. The last episode was good. Looking back,
be interesting to see if we run into that here, though.
It'll be interesting to see because there's a lot they can't. I mean, if the next episode is fully committed to just here's Soul's background history, right, with this event, and then maybe here's Chimere's past. Maybe we just next episode is we see kind of what went on with both
like
in
episode 3 again. Yeah, that would story-wise that'd make a lot of sense, I guess.
We have to do it at some point, right? Unless you're just going to leave Chimere's background in the dark. I'd like to know something about him.
Yeah,
but we obviously got to do Souls. That's a necessary component.
Well, and the Brendock deal, we got to see Kelnaka fighting Torben too. So at some point, there's going to be
there's still scenes we haven't seen. Yeah,
there's a lot. There's that's probably an episode. You're probably right. That's probably a full episode. And then you go to the 7-8 where it's like 7 sets up the big finale per the usual. That's probably how they do it.
And I don't think this is a show where episode, what was this, 5? Episode 5 was all our lightsaber action. I feel like there's going to be some more duels. I mean, I feel like they got to fight again, right?
At the end,
there's plenty of lightsabers laying around in the forest. I mean, that's not a problem.
That is true. There's a lot. Now, he did cut a lot of them in half, but
yeah, he did get a few of them. So I can't imagine that all of the action was packed into 5, and we're not going to get any more dueling. So I feel like there's got to be a point where they come back into conflict with each other.
Major letdown if there's not any more.
Yeah, I would say so.
For sure by episode 8 there's going to be some more. So we'll see that, because what's her name? Not Osha. May has Yord's lightsaber. So I mean, you probably assume she fights Soul maybe, or she fights the Sith. Either way, she's not unarmed. So I think we're going to see some more of that. So that's probably about does it for episode 5. I mean, we talked around a lot of it, a lot of action, A lot of fun. So next week we will watch 6, talk about this, kind of do the usual of where we think it's going. Probably a flashback episode. So we'll see how that goes. Hoping for some Wookiee action. That's my next week hopes, is seeing Kelnaka with a saber.
Finally see him fight.
Keep everybody happy. So that's what we're hoping for. So we appreciate you taking the time to watch. Drop a comment on whatever you thought of this episode. Be nice if you didn't like it. We're cool if you didn't like it. Just be civil about not liking it. We will discuss that with you in the comments. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time.